The reading is from Acts chapter 12 and verses 1 to 19, and you can find it on page 1106 of the church Bibles. I think you can also see it on the overhead projector. Peter's miraculous escape from prison. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. When he saw that this met with approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to the guard to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said. And the chains fell from Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and your sandals." And Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed by the 1st and 2nd guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen." When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed that she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter's at the door!" "You're out of your mind," they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, "Then it must be his angel." But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. "Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this," he said, and then he left for another place. In the morning, there was no small commotion among the guards as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed.
Thank you, Jim. That is one of those stories that you just have to read. It's one of those ones that there's so much in it, and actually I'm a bit afraid because there is so much in it. And it's also one of the few stories that are in the Bible that are obviously funny. Maybe I'll have to highlight some of that in a bit, because it's just remarkable, all the stuff going on there. We've been talking, as I said already, about persistence, about endurance, about this idea that bad things will happen. We're promised it, we're told it, you will have trouble, there will be persecution, that you will have strife and difficulty in this world. And we've been talking about how we get through that, how we endure, how Christ in the room makes the difference. And as I said, my only hesitancy and something I've been challenged by this week particularly is that we've gone too far one way. We've gone too far down the endurance and get through and keep going and just keep trusting. And we've lost some of the joy and the confidence and the lightness that the Christian walk invites us to. That this assurance that we have that is given to us in the gospel. And so today we're going to think about that. We find that this situation where Peter has been put in prison, and it says the church is earnestly praying. That they're praying for Peter in that situation. As I wrote notes this morning, just jotting down a few ideas, I wrote prayer warriors. And what it wrote down on the screen was prayer worriers. I thought there's a sermon in that. Some of us, I think, as we endure it, as we get through, we become prayer warriors. We worry out loud and we call it prayer. We've got our shopping list. Telling God what to do isn't praying. And yet it's often what we fall into. There is something we're invited to beyond worrying out loud. And in this text, I think we find it. This situation, although Jim read out an awful lot there and explains an awful lot of what's going on, there's even more behind the scenes. The previous chapter tells us that there's a famine in the land. Someone has prophesied it and it's come. People are starving. And in that situation, it's not that the food prices have gone up and they can't have their favorite cake. It is that they literally cannot eat to survive. People are dying by the thousands. Just at the start of this passage, it tells us that Herod has started persecuting the church. And James, one of the leaders in the church, has been killed by Herod. And then we read these simple words, the church is earnestly praying. Peter's been arrested and he's been thrown in this cell. I wonder what they're praying for. Because it takes so much more faith to pray for Peter when you've just lost James. It takes so much faith to pray for Peter in that situation when you're watching people starve to death around you. Whether we like to admit it or not, our faith takes a hit when we have to pray in light of unanswered previous prayers. Prayers that God seems to have passed over. Solutions that we haven't received. And yet here we find a church earnestly praying still, despite what has just happened. Peter's been arrested. And so the church keep praying, but I wonder if they have a maybe faith like us. Maybe we'll get answers, maybe we won't. I wonder if things have started to grow in the absence of answers. Anger can grow in the absence of answers. We get mad, we can't control things. We get mad, we don't know what to do. We get mad because we can't figure out what it is we're meant to be up to. Cynicism grows in the absence of answers. What's the point? What difference does it make? Well, why bother? And yet here we see something different. We often think that we're the first set of people to go through unanswered questions. The first people who have wrestled with a diagnosis that we didn't see coming, or a relapse that we thought we'd overcome. But here we have a church where James has just had his head taken off, and there's every chance that the same thing will happen to Peter. And the first challenge I get here is that when the enemy knocks on our door in that place and tells us this is how it will always be. You can't really believe all that stuff that you've just been singing about water into wine and open the eyes of the blind and an awesome God. He doesn't really do that. Or he does it for others, but not for you. And it's that I wanted to come against today, because I sense it in me. A kind of a realism that says, okay, you know what, let's be realistic. Things are going to be tough and we might get answers and we might see God work, but let's not put our hope on that. Let's just try and get through by ourselves. Let's try and make do with what we've got. But I saw, and it was this that really inspired me this week. It said, the pessimist says the cup is half empty. The optimist says the cup is half full. The psalmist says, my cup runneth over. And I wonder if today we can just talk about a running over faith, an overflowing faith in the midst of situations like this. So the story goes, and there's so much to unpack. The story goes, Peter is there, and he's among 16 guards on a rotation. There is something about Peter where they think 16 guards is the right number. I don't know why you think that many. 4 would have done, and they have 4 at a time, but they got 16 on rotation to try and stop this guy. He's there and he's sleeping among the guards, and this angel comes in. This angel steps into the situation and strikes him, it says. Do you notice that? Angel strike. I don't know your pictures of angels at home. They're kind of very gentle, very smooth skin, very nice. The idea of one giving you a swift kick in the side because you're not listening probably doesn't fit, but here it is. The angel strikes me as a lot like my mum. Comes into the room, it says, the cell fills with light. Come in, put the lights on, open the curtains. Come on, get up. Peter doesn't wake up, so he's got to give him a bit of a kick to get him going. Come on, get up. There's this urgency about it. Not this sweet, gentle, wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey. Come on, sleepyhead. But Peter, come on. Come on, we've got to get going. I wonder if some of the strikes that you've had in your life, that you've put down to the enemy, maybe God trying to get you moving. I wonder if some of the hits that you've taken haven't been the opposition coming against you, but God trying to urge you and spur you on and go, come on, wake up, look around you, see what's going on. Take note, the angel was in the room and Peter's still asleep. The angel puts on the lights and Peter's still asleep. The angel has to give him a kick before he finally stirs him. What's going on? Get up. Because we often get stuck. And a loving kick, don't try this at home, but a loving kick, sometimes there is this aggressive attempt to get us free. He hasn't got time to explain or to answer his questions. Peter has to move forward by faith without explanations. I'll say that again, moving forward by faith without explanations. So the angel says, get up. Quick, get up. Peter, we heard it with urgency. Get up. Quick, get up. My question is, how? I'm chained to these guards. How am I going to get up? What do you mean, get up? How am I meant to do that? I'm stuck to something bigger than me. I'm imprisoned in something that's beyond my strength. I'm chained to these burly men with swords by their sides and 2 more at the door. How do you expect me to get up? The answer is he gets up and the chains fall off. He does it. We're going to sing later a song. Thine eye diffused a quickening ray. I woke, the dungeon flamed with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed me. Just did it. I would be asking how. Just explain to me how this is going to work. Peter gets up and he goes. Second command is put on your clothes and sandals. My question is why? So I can look good for my execution? So I can be smartly dressed as I go and have my head removed from my body? Why? What's the plan? Someone asked me that last summer, a relative of ours, what's your 5-year plan, Dean? And what I wanted to say, I'm looking for a 5-minute plan. I'm trying to figure out what's going on right now, but why? I don't know. I don't know why things happen. I don't know why I'm meant to do this, but what it says is Peter did so. Didn't ask a question, just got up and did so. The angel says to him, wrap your cloak around you and follow me. What's your question? Where? So I will do, but first of all, where am I going? What's the destination? If it's got sunbeds and tequilas, I'm in. But if not, then I've got some questions. Where are we going? Where do you think we're going to go? We're going to get to a door and a closed gate. What's next? Then the guards find me and drag me back. Where are you taking me? Where's the destination? What's the point? I need to know it's safe. I need to know that I'm secure. I need to know the flight schedule and when I'm getting off and when I'm getting on. Where am I going? But it doesn't. It says Peter followed him out of the prison. And I love the next bit. It says, but he had no idea that the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. In all of these things where I'm going how and why and where, Peter's going, I don't know what's going on, but I'm just going to do it. Don't really know what's happening, but I'm going to follow. Don't really know how it's going to work out, but I'm getting up. Don't really know why I'm getting dressed, but I'm going to do it. Don't know where we're going, but I'm going to follow. We often want answers, and what we get are commands. We want to know the explanations behind things, and God says, here's what I'm giving you to do right now. And as he does it, each step, something happens to confirm that he's on the right track, until he finally realizes, oh, I'm not dreaming. Oh, I'm awake. Oh, this isn't just make-believe. As I'm doing it, I'm finding that it's real. As I'm obeying, I'm finding that God is faithful. As I'm following, God is leading me. It says it comes to a gate and the gate's opened. We don't get surprised by that, do we? Because we go to the shops and that happens all the time. Doors just open. They're motion activated. Yeah, there's another sermon in that. Motion activated. When he's in motion, the doors open. When he's moving, the gates open. When he's obeying, things start happening. Not when he gets the answers or the explanation, but as he's following, as he's obeying, the doors start to open, the chains fall off, he goes on. We're waiting for an answer, and God is waiting for an action. So Peter goes, and he finds the people praying, and he knocks at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. And here it is. She recognized Peter's voice, and she's kind of like this, and she runs off, and Peter's still there going, hello? Anyone in there? And she shouts out, Peter's at the door. He's obviously being a bit loud. She recognizes his voice. Maybe he's shouting, it's me, it's Peter. And she runs off and tells them. And so they say, you're out of your mind. Shh, we're praying for Peter. Stop. But Peter's at the door. Shh, quiet, we're trying to pray for Peter. Come on, this is serious. She kept insisting. And so they say, well, it must be his angel. They think it's more likely that Peter's already died and that his angels come to visit him than that he's escaped from prison and is stood at the door. They have greater belief that Peter's already lost his head and is gone to a better place than that he might have escaped and is with them. But Peter keeps on knocking. And when they open the door, they see him, they are astonished. They're obviously in a bit of a flap because it says he motioned with his hands. It's kind of, calm, sit down, calm down, right, get yourself together, come on, be quiet. And he describes all that's happened. And he says, tell James and the other brothers, this is another James, a church leader, and the other brothers and sisters about this. He said, and then he leaves for another place. He's knocking, and they can't see that Peter is already there. While they're knocking on God's door in prayer, God is knocking on their door. Because we've stood in church, and I've stood in church, and we've prayed, and we've had prayer meetings where we've prayed, and I've sung songs like many of you do, not really believing the truth, but hoping for the truth. And I've wrestled, and I've needed God too. Preachers need God too. And I've sung songs not really knowing whether I can trust the words they say. But here we're told, if you just pause for a moment in between knocks, you might notice what God has already done. If you take a moment in between all your busyness and all your activity, you might just be aware that God has already done something for you. They don't want to interrupt their prayer meeting to get the answer to their prayer meeting. And I've prayed for my family going through things. I've prayed for the church going through things. I just wonder if sometimes we just need to pause and recognize God has already done so much. Pause and hear the knock at the door and realize he has already done more than we ever expected. I don't think the church was praying for Peter to escape from prison. That's why they're so astonished. They're probably praying, as we often do, God, comfort him in this situation. Give him peace in the midst of that turmoil. They've already lost James. Maybe their expectation is dashed. We can't expect him to come out. James didn't come out. That prayer wasn't answered. So we'll just pray, God, be with him in that place. God does exceedingly more than they ask or imagine. And they're astonished by it. In the midst of all these unanswered prayer, God just does something to say, you can still trust me. I am still faithful. I am still good. I will do more than you expect or imagine. You can trust me. And even when the worst happens, you can trust me. Some things we need to sleep through, like Peter. Some things we need to pray through, and many things we need to act through. Someone said that the best way out is through. Winston Churchill said that if you find yourself going through hell, keep going. We go through these things, but we don't go through them alone. How? Because this is all very well, we read these stories, they're great. How can I do it? Well, there is a clue in the passage. And it's hidden in plain sight, and if you just have to read it very slowly, because there's so much going on here, and I could preach a whole series on this passage, but there is one line that stands out to me that I overlooked. I'm sure many of us will have overlooked, because it's not as interesting at all, the funny and good stuff around it. And it's the line that says this: "This happened during the festival of unleavened bread." It's a pointless detail. This could happen at any time of the year. It doesn't bear any bearing on what happens next, except it does. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. We sometimes call this Passover. Passover. And in the story, we find Peter asleep. There's another story in our Bible about the festival of unleavened bread, and another story where Peter is asleep. It goes back to a meal that Peter had with a few of his friends and some guy called Jesus. And after the meal, they're led out to a garden. And Jesus asks Peter and the friends, he says, "Can you pray for me?" And Jesus goes away in his agony because he's aware that his death is coming in the morning. Peter goes off and starts to pray, but falls asleep. Jesus comes back and says, "Can you not pray for me?" And goes away, and once again, Peter falls asleep. And then, as the story goes, the soldiers come to arrest him. They take him off, and they put him on trial. And in the morning, he's executed. He's put on a cross, and he suffers and dies. And Peter sees all this happen. He feels the guilt of not being able to bear up his friend in prayer. He fell asleep. And a young girl comes and challenges him. And he goes, "No, don't know him." And he runs away. He's intimidated by a young girl. And here we find a very different Peter. A Peter who sleeps, but not because of weakness, but who sleeps between two guards because he's at rest. He doesn't have night nurse. He doesn't have white noise or whale song to soothe him off. But I wonder if this happening at this time sent Peter's memory back to that previous night. Because that night doesn't end with Jesus dying on a cross. It ends with the tomb being opened and Jesus walking free. For the joy set before him, he endures the cross, scorning its shame, and then sits down at the right hand of the throne of God. Peter can sleep because Jesus is seated. Before he was sleeping out of weakness, now he's sleeping out of a sense of peace and trust in his God. What has happened between that first story and the second is a resurrection. Something has changed, and now the greatest enemy has been defeated. The powers of this world have been disarmed, and the worst that can happen to us cannot happen to us. Death becomes a doorway. Jesus rose from the dead, and we go, well, that's not really relevant to this. It's the only thing that's relevant. It's the only thing that matters. If he rose from the dead, then I am loved and I am secure. If he rose from the dead, then all the noise and the attack and the impact of the world on me is that of a defeated enemy. All the destruction and all the pain and all the suffering is inflicted by a mortally wounded opponent. It's just a cornered wolf snapping and biting. He's afraid, it's over, and he's lost. The resurrection takes the full stop of our lives and turns it into a comma. It takes a shut door and makes it into an open one to a new place. It means that people are gone from our sight, but they're not gone from his sight. They're in a better place, a better presence. They are with him. And how we respond is natural. We are despairing in the face of unanswered prayer. We are broken at those that we lose. We are heartbroken at the suffering that we endure. That is natural, but something supernatural has taken place. That means that Peter can respond differently. And it's like the writer puts this little line in there to say, none of what I'm going to say makes sense. None of this story about Peter and all these things that are going to happen, it doesn't make sense unless you remember that other festival. None of this is, you're going to go, yeah, that's pie in the sky, that's just wishful thinking for gullible people, unless you remember another story that happened at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Another incident where everything seemed hopeless, where there was no possible way God could finally turn this around, where everything was gone and darkness engulfed everybody. And then it didn't. And then light began to shine. And then life broke out. And then hope was rekindled. And they saw him and they met him and they embraced him. And so now Peter responds differently. Death is defeated. The grave has lost its power. And the impossible has already happened. So that the natural direction of everything has been turned upside down. And we don't believe it. And we can't figure it out. But then we can't figure out a lot of things. Nothing can separate you from this love. And we put our faith there. And so Peter, chained between two burly men, with two more on the gate, with another 12 on cycle to stop him getting out, he sleeps. He rests. He trusts. Because in the morning, even if his prayer isn't answered and he loses his head, it's not the worst that can happen. If his prayer isn't answered, he doesn't get to live another day, he can still sleep. He's okay. He doesn't get to see his friends again, he can sleep. He's okay. He doesn't get to carry on his ministry, the ministry that God himself gave him. He's okay. This is the difference. And perhaps you sit here and think, well, that's fine. Peter can do that. He's got greater faith than I. This is good news for all. That whoever believes, God so loves the world that whoever would believe would not perish, would not have a full stop at the end of their life, but would find eternal life. Amen. Would know him, would go on knowing him. That you can't be separated from that love. Nothing in all creation, death or martyrdom, cannot separate you. Let's get specific. The loss of a job, the loss of a spouse cannot separate you from his love. Cancer and famine cannot separate you from his love. And in the midst of this, you are surrounded by enemies. You are chained to them and they're bound to them, but you can sleep. Because the worst that can happen to you cannot happen to you. You cannot be separated from Christ. You cannot be shut out of God's presence. You can't be lost. He doesn't have GPS, he has JPS, Jesus' positioning system. If he's in you, he knows where you are. But the enemy will try to convince you otherwise. While God's knocking on the door telling you he's going to do it, there is an enemy knocking at the door telling you to doubt. I always wonder, why 16 guards? That's excessive. Could it be the enemy knows that there's something in you that he needs to stop? Could it be all the things that are being thrown at you are his attempt to silence that? Because if you get through what you're going through with a testimony of God's goodness, then he's in trouble. If you can get through what you're going through and you still praise God, someone else is going to get bold. If you can survive what it is that you are going through and still say he has been with me every step of the way, someone else might put their trust in him. You're a danger. 16 guards for one man is excessive. This is what the enemy does. Because he knows there's power in this. He knows we're in trouble. He's in trouble if this gets out. If this good news spreads. If this hope it gets contagious. If this confidence starts to build, then he's in trouble. And so he'll do all he can to convince us, don't bother. And in this story, we just find a ridiculous hope. We find an excessive confidence. We find this ridiculous peace. That's why they say it surpasses understanding. That's not just fancy words. It's like, we can't explain this. It doesn't make sense. We get it. When you experience it, you go, wow, it is good. And it's possible because of what he has done. It's not Easter, but I think we are still allowed to talk about the resurrection. It's our confidence. And this year, whatever it is that we face, I didn't want us to go through and go, right, Dean said we just got to press on, we got to keep trusting, we just got to be faithful. We do it with a smile. We do it with joy. We do it with peace. We do it because our message is good news for all people.
Amen.
And I get it if you struggle to hold that. I get it if the enemy has done a work and a number on you, but you need to know that it is the enemy that's doing that. You need to know that he will do everything to convince you. But this passage is so rich because of the exact situation, unanswered prayers and desperation and grief and sorrow, and yet here is Peter sleeping, remembering, I can because he did. I can get through, I can go through because he has gone through before me. I can follow and I can just obey without answers because he is good and trustworthy. So today, maybe your response is, I just need to have a sleep. I can go to bed, I can rest because he's good. If the worst happens to me in the night or in the morning, it's not the worst. Maybe you need to pray. You need to be praying through this. Not giving God your shopping list or telling him what to do, but saying, God, just need to know you're with me. Just need to understand that you're walking beside me. Or maybe you just need to obey your way through it. You, like me, like all of us, look for answers. Why God? How God? Where God? And he comes and says, get up. Get dressed. Let's go. And as you follow, you begin to understand. Or maybe not. But you're obedient. As you follow, you start to see God at work. You start to share your testimony. And Peter, it seems, for all his knocking on the door, it wasn't to get away from the guards like I would be doing. It wasn't to get to a safe place. It was just to get in and go, guys, God has done something amazing. Okay, see you later. And then off he goes. He just wants to get in to say, look, God is at work. Don't worry. Let's go. God has rescued. He's still with us. Let's go. I know the famine. I know James, but look, he's just done this. I didn't believe it. I thought I was dreaming, but he's done it. So let's go. And off he goes. Just drops in for a moment to say, guys, keep going. He's good. I'll see you later. And today, maybe that's the message. Guys, I know there have been unanswered prayers. I know there is wrestling. I know there is despair. There is heartache. But guys, he's still working. Okay, I'll see you later. That's it. And we can know that because he's already done it. He's already finished. The enemy's already defeated. Death has already had its day. And now before us is glory, is hope, something that can never be taken away. In a moment, we're going to sing. We're going to sing a few songs because I think we need to get this into us. We need to let it work. We need to saturate in it. We need to marinate in it. You know, you cook, you put something in a bowl and just let it sit so it soaks in. It gets right down into those places. We're going to sing a few songs to do this. This amazing grace. We're going to sing that song about the diffusing ray or whatever it is, and then the light and being set free. We're going to sing this love that rescues us. We're going to sing about the cross to remind us. We're going to say thank you. And as you do that, maybe, I don't know, you find your place in the story. I don't know where it's going to land. Maybe the one that just doesn't need to sing, but needs to stop with your prayer meetings because someone's knocking on the door going, look what God's done. And you just need to go, oh yeah, I'm so busy. I didn't see that he's at the door. The answer's already here. I've already got what I need. I've already got what I'm asking for. Perhaps you just need to have a sleep. Just rest. You're okay. It's not the end. Whatever the full stop is, it's not the end. Whatever it is, it doesn't mean you're separated from his love. You're okay. Or maybe you just need to get on and obey. You've got what to do, and you get on and do it. And you live with unanswered questions. You move forward by faith. I'm going to pray, and then we'll marinate. Father, I realise that this all seems like ramblings of someone wanting it to be true. I realise that this can all seem like ridiculous optimism. But I want to confess that I've so often reduced your good news to simply coping with situations. I've reduced it to simply putting my head down and accepting this is the way things are. And I've so often allowed the situation to be the final line, the loss of a person to be the bottom line, the suffering and struggle of your people to be the bottom line, and we just have to accept it and get on with it. You write a different ending. That isn't the end of the story. The story doesn't end in a garden of agony. It ends in a garden, but one with an empty tomb. It ends in a garden with the tree of life that brings healing to the nations. It ends with tears being wiped away and all hurt and pain and suffering being swept away. It ends with your love and your glory filling us and renewing us. It ends with us, not with our questions answered, but with our vision filled with the goodness and the love and the grace of our God. So I just ask, Father, that you would raise our heads, open our eyes, help us get this good news deep down on the inside. Help us to be resurrection people. I pray, Father, for all those people who do have those unanswered questions, who are wrestling, and who are fighting against the voice of an enemy who wants to imprison them and keep them trapped. I pray today for freedom. Whether through a swift kick or a gentle nudge, Father, wake us up to what you are doing. Like that cell, Father, fill this place with your light. Help us to move forward by faith, with our questions unanswered, without explanations, but with the hope and the confidence that the one we follow is good, is our King, is the one who gave it all for us and is trustworthy and true. We ask it in his name. Amen.